The explosion lit up the darkness of space like a dying star. Metal and fire scattered across the void as the human fighter came apart under the Crithian weapons. Inside the warship Talon's Edge, Commander Zethrax watched the destruction with satisfaction. His scales rippled with pleasure, the Crithian equivalent of a smile. Another human pest eliminated, his second officer announced, but Zethrax raised one clawed hand. His 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the debris field on the screen. Something was wrong. The explosion pattern was too controlled, too deliberate. He had destroyed hundreds of human ships, and this did not look right. "Scan for escape pods," he ordered. The sensor officer worked quickly, his fingers dancing across the controls. After a moment, he looked up with surprise. "Commander, there is one pod. It's drifting toward the asteroid field." Zethrax felt his blood warm with excitement. A human pilot, alive and intact. These warriors were valuable. They could be questioned, studied, broken. The humans were winning too many battles lately, and the Crithian collective needed to understand why these primitive creatures fought so well. "Bring him in," Zethrax commanded. "I want him alive." The retrieval took 30 minutes. The escape pod was small and damaged, barely functioning. When the boarding team dragged it into the cargo bay, Zethrax went down personally to see his prize. He wanted to look into the human's eyes when fear took hold. The pod door hissed open. Steam poured out, and through it stepped a human male. He was not what Zethrax expected. Most human pilots were young, full of fire and rage. This one looked older, maybe 40 cycles by human standards. His face was covered in scars, thin lines that crossed his jaw and cheek. His hair was dark with streaks of gray. He wore a simple flight suit, torn and burned in places. But it was his eyes that made Zethrax pause. They were empty, cold, like looking into the void of space itself. There was no fear there, no anger, nothing at all. The human stepped forward calmly as 6 Crithian soldiers surrounded him with weapons raised. He did not resist when they grabbed his arms. He did not struggle when they bound his wrists. He simply stood there, breathing slowly, watching everything with those dead eyes. "Take him to the interrogation chamber," Zethrax ordered. He felt uneasy, though he did not know why. It was just one human, unarmed and captured. What threat could he possibly be? The guards pushed the human forward. He walked without resistance, his steps measured and calm. The other prisoners they had taken always fought or begged or tried to bargain. This one acted like he was taking a casual walk through a garden. In the interrogation chamber, they chained him to a chair bolted to the floor. The room was cold and dark, designed to break the spirit. Zethrax entered alone, wanting this moment for himself. He circled the human slowly, studying him. "You are alone now," Zethrax said in the human language. All Crithian commanders learned it to better understand their enemy. "Your ship is destroyed. Your people cannot help you. Tell me what I want to know, and your death will be quick." The human said nothing. He did not even look at Zethrax. His gaze remained fixed on the far wall as if the commander was not even there. Zethrax felt his anger rising. He was a commander of the Crithian fleet, conqueror of 17 worlds. This human should be trembling. "What is your name?" Zethrax demanded. For the first time, the human's eyes moved. They fixed on Zethrax with an intensity that made the commander take an involuntary step back. When the human spoke, his voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Sierra 77. Zethrax blinked in confusion. "That is not a name. That is a designation." "It's what I am," the human replied. Then his eyes returned to the wall, dismissing Zethrax once more. The commander felt rage burning in his chest. He struck the human across the face, his claws leaving shallow cuts. The human's head snapped to the side from the impact. Blood ran down his cheek. But when he turned back, there was still nothing in his eyes. No pain, no reaction at all. "You will speak when I command it," Zethrax hissed. "I already did," the human said calmly. Zethrax wanted to kill him right there, but prisoners were valuable. Intelligence was valuable. He stormed out of the chamber, ordering guards to watch the human while he consulted with his intelligence officer. Officer Krenthus was young but brilliant, one of the best analysts in the fleet. He had been studying human military structures for cycles, learning their patterns and tactics. When Zethrax told him about the prisoner's designation, Krenthus immediately began searching their captured databases. The commander watched as thousands of human files scrolled past on the screen. Krenthus was muttering to himself, his small eyes darting back and forth as he read. Then suddenly he stopped. His body went completely still. His scales paled from their normal green to a sickly gray. "What is it?" Zethrax asked. Krenthus did not answer. He was reading something on the screen, his breath coming in short gasps. His hands trembled on the controls. "Officer Krenthus, report." The young Crithian turned slowly. His face showed pure terror, an expression Zethrax had never seen on one of his own kind. "Commander," Krenthus whispered. "That designation, Sierra 77, I know what it means." "Explain." Krenthus pulled up a file on the main screen. It was a human military document partially decoded. The header read, "Special Operations Division, Blacklist Personnel. The humans have a classification for their most dangerous operatives," Krenthus explained, his voice shaking. "Soldiers who operate alone, behind enemy lines. They are given number designations instead of names. Sierra 77 is on this list, so he is one soldier. He is chained in our brig. Commander, you don't understand." Krenthus pulled up more files and Zethrax saw dozens of reports from Crithian outposts and bases. Outpost Meridian destroyed 3 cycles ago. 17 soldiers dead, killed in their sleep. Security footage showed 1 human. Base Commander Thaxeron assassinated 2 cycles ago. His entire guard detail eliminated. 1 human. The fuel depot at Caldris sabotaged, causing the loss of an entire supply fleet. Witnesses reported 1 human. Zethrax felt cold spreading through his body. "Are you saying all of these were done by our prisoner?" "Not saying, Commander. I'm reading it from our own intelligence reports. Cross-referencing with human communications we've intercepted, this designation appears again and again. The humans have a name for him. They call him the Reaper." The word hung in the air like poison. Zethrax wanted to laugh to dismiss it as human propaganda. But the fear in Krenthus's eyes was real. The reports were real. "How many of our people has he killed?" Zethrax asked quietly. Krenthus worked the controls, adding up numbers from different reports. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. "Confirmed kills over 300. Suspected kills over 1,000. And that's just what we have documented." Zethrax felt his world shifting. 1 human. 1 single human had done this? "We need to kill him," Krenthus said urgently. "Right now, Commander. We need to space him, burn him, destroy him completely. Having him on this ship is a mistake." Zethrax wanted to agree. Every instinct screamed danger. But pride and curiosity held him back. If this human was truly so dangerous, studying him could give the Crithians the key to defeating all humans. And he was chained, unarmed, surrounded by 300 Crithian soldiers. What could one man do? "Double the guards on his cell," Zethrax ordered. "I want armed soldiers watching him at all times. But we keep him alive. We will learn his secrets." Krenthus looked like he wanted to argue, but discipline won. He nodded and returned to his station. Zethrax went back to the interrogation chamber. The human was exactly as he had left him, sitting calmly, blood dried on his face. The commander approached slowly. "So you are famous among your people," Zethrax said. "The Reaper, a killer of Crithians. You must be very proud." The human finally looked at him again. When he spoke, his voice held no emotion at all. "How long has it been since you captured me?" The question was so unexpected that Zethrax answered without thinking. 4 hours. "Why does it matter?" The human nodded slowly as if confirming something. "They'll be here in 20 minutes. Who will be here?" But the human said nothing more. His eyes returned to the wall and a small smile crossed his face. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knew a terrible secret. Zethrax felt fear for the first time in his military career. He left the chamber quickly, heading back to the bridge. The human's words echoed in his mind. "They'll be here in 20 minutes. He was almost to the bridge when the alarms began screaming. The ship shuddered as proximity warnings lit up every screen. On the bridge, chaos ruled. Officers shouted over each other, trying to understand what was happening. "Report!" Zethrax roared. The sensor officer looked up, his face twisted with confusion and terror. "Commander, we have incoming vessels. They appeared from nowhere. Our sensors didn't detect them until they were almost on top of us." "How many?" 6 small fighters. Human design. But Commander, they're moving at speeds that should be impossible, and they're heading straight for us." Zethrax gripped his command chair. He looked at the chronometer. Exactly 20 minutes had passed since the human's prediction. The Reaper had known. Somehow he had known. And if he knew about the attack, what else did he know? What else had he planned? The alarm screamed through every corridor of the Talon's edge. Red lights flashed in rhythm with the warning siren. Zethrak stood on the bridge watching 6 small dots on the screen race toward his massive warship. They were human fighters, sleek and fast, moving in perfect formation. "All weapons target those ships," he commanded. "Destroy them before they get close." The weapons officer worked frantically at his console. Turrets along the hull swiveled and began firing. Bright streams of plasma cut through space, reaching for the human fighters. But the small ships moved like dancers, weaving between the shots with impossible precision. "They're too fast, Commander," the weapons officer reported. "Our targeting systems can't lock on." Zethrax felt his anger building. How were these tiny human ships outmaneuvering Crithian weapons? His species had conquered 17 worlds with this technology. "Launch interceptor squadrons," he ordered. "Send everything we have. I want those humans turned to dust." On the lower decks, Krenthos sat at his intelligence station, watching everything unfold. His hands shook as he pulled up more files on the prisoner. The more he read, the worse it became. He had to make the commander understand. They needed to kill the human now before it was too late. He ran from his station, heading toward the detention level. The corridors were filled with soldiers rushing to battle stations. Krenthos pushed through them, desperate to reach the brig. When he arrived, 6 guards stood outside the prisoner's cell, weapons ready. Through the transparent wall, Krenthos could see the human. He was still sitting calmly in his chair, chains on his wrists. But now his head was tilted slightly as if he was listening to something far away. "Has he done anything?" Krenthos asked the guard captain. "Nothing, sir. He just sits there." "But, sir, is it true? Is he really the Reaper?" Krenthos nodded slowly. He activated his datapad and began reading aloud, wanting the guards to understand the danger. 3 cycles ago, Outpost Meridian. It was our most secure facility in the Outer Rim. 100 soldiers, defensive shields, automated weapon systems. One morning, everyone was dead, killed in their sleep with precision cuts. Security footage showed a single human infiltrator. He moved through the base like a ghost, invisible to sensors. The footage captured his face for only 3 seconds. It was him. The guards shifted nervously, gripping their weapons tighter. Krenthos continued. 2 cycles ago, Base Commander Thaxron was hosting a meeting of military leaders. 20 of our best commanders in one room, surrounded by guards. They were planning the invasion of a human colony. Someone poisoned their air supply. All 20 died within minutes. The guards found one human's DNA at the scene. His. "How is this possible?" a guard asked. "How can one human do such things?" "Because he's not just a soldier," Krenthos explained. "The humans have a special program. They take volunteers, people who have lost everything to war. They train them for cycles in every form of combat, infiltration, and sabotage. They teach them to survive alone behind enemy lines for years. They strip away everything that makes them normal people. What's left is something else. A weapon in human form." One of the guards laughed nervously. "But look at him. He's just sitting there. He's chained. What can he do?" Krenthos felt his frustration rising. "You don't understand. I've been reading their military psychology reports. Humans like him, they don't think the way we do. They plan everything 10 steps ahead. Every action has a purpose." "What purpose could getting captured have?" another guard asked. That was the question that terrified Krenthos. He pulled up more data on his pad, showing reports from the battle where they captured the human. "Look at this. His ship had full power when we engaged. His weapons were operational, but he only fired a few shots. He maneuvered away from our fleet toward empty space. He led us on a chase for 20 minutes before his ship exploded. So he made sure we captured him in this exact location. And he made sure it took exactly the amount of time it did. He knew help was coming. He knew how long it would take them to reach us. This wasn't a capture. This was an insertion." The guards looked at each other with growing fear. One of them stepped closer to the cell, staring at the human. If he wanted to be here, why? What's his mission? Krenthos had been thinking about that same question. He pulled up schematics of the Talon's Edge on his datapad. This isn't just any ship. This is Commander Zethrax's flagship, the command center for this entire sector. All our tactical data is here. Fleet movements, encryption codes, supply routes, everything. Understanding dawned on the guards' faces. One of them whispered, "He's here to steal our information." "Or destroy it," Krenthos added. "Or both." Inside his cell, the human finally moved. His head turned and those cold eyes fixed on Krenthus. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but clear enough to hear through the barrier. "You're a smart one. What's your name?" Krenthus felt his breath catch. The human was looking at him with something like respect. It made him feel even more afraid. "Officer Krenthus," he answered without thinking. The human nodded slowly. "You should leave this ship, Krenthus, while you still can. Is that a threat?" "It's advice." Above them, the battle was going poorly for the Crithians. The human fighters had destroyed 3 interceptor squadrons without taking a single hit. They moved with perfect coordination, as if sharing one mind. Now they were closing in on the Talon's edge itself, heading for the main hangar bay. On the bridge, Zethrax watched his forces fall apart. "Seal the hangar. Don't let them inside." But even as he gave the order, something strange happened. Every screen on the bridge flickered. For just a second, they all went dark. When they came back online, something was different. The weapons officer noticed it first. "Commander, we're locked out of the defensive grid. I can't control any of the hangar weapons." "What? How? I don't know, sir. It's like someone else is controlling them." Zethrax felt ice in his veins. He thought about the human prisoner, sitting calmly in his cell. He thought about Krenthus's words about planning ahead. "Get me a direct line to the detention level, now." When the connection opened, he could hear alarm in the guard captain's voice. "Commander, the prisoner, he's been moving his hands." "And what do you mean, moving his hands?" "His fingers, sir. He's been tapping them against the chair arm. We thought it was nervous movement, but Krenthus says it's code. He's been transmitting." "Transmitting?" "He's in a sealed cell with no equipment." Krenthus's voice came through the speaker. "Commander, human special forces have microtransmitters, sometimes implanted in teeth or under the skin. If he has one, he's been broadcasting this entire time. Ship layouts, guard positions, security protocols, everything he's seen and heard." Zethrax wanted to scream. They had brought an enemy spy onto their flagship and given him 4 hours to observe everything. On the detention level, the lights suddenly went dark. Emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in red light. The guards raised their weapons, pointing them at the prisoner's cell. The human was standing now, chains still on his wrists. He was looking up at the ceiling, counting quietly to himself. 3, 2, 1. A massive explosion shook the entire ship. The guards were thrown to the floor. Krenthus grabbed onto a railing to keep from falling. Alarms screamed even louder now, and somewhere in the distance they could hear the sound of weapons fire. "What was that?" a guard shouted. The human answered, still calm. "My ride is here." That was them blowing through the hangar bay doors. More explosions followed, getting closer. The sound of human weapons echoed through the corridors. The guards looked at each other in panic. They were trained soldiers, but this was different. An enemy force was inside their ship. Krenthus activated his communicator. "Commander, the humans have breached the ship. They're fighting their way through the lower decks." "How many?" Zethrax demanded. Before Krenthus could answer, one of the guards checked a security panel. "Sensors show 6 humans, just 6. But they're cutting through our soldiers like they're nothing. 6 humans against a crew of 300 Crithians. It should have been impossible." But Krenthus understood now. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were like the prisoner. Special forces. Reapers. The prisoner spoke again, his voice carrying easily through the cell barrier. "You have 2 choices. Open this door and let me go, or stay here and wait for my team. Either way, I'm leaving. But if you make them fight through you, none of you will survive." One of the guards stepped forward, anger overcoming fear. "You think we're cowards? You think we'll just let you walk out?" The human's expression didn't change. "I think you're soldiers following orders. There's no shame in surviving. My team won't give you that choice. They'll kill every one of you to reach me. Then they'll die trying." The human shook his head slowly. "No, they won't." The sounds of battle were getting closer. They could hear Crithian soldiers screaming, weapons firing in short bursts. Then silence. Then more screaming. The human team was moving fast, clearing each corridor with brutal efficiency. Krenthus looked at his data pad. Security footage showed 6 humans in black armor, moving through the ship like a precision machine. They used human weapons that fired solid projectiles instead of plasma. Every shot killed. There was no wasted movement, no hesitation. In less than 5 minutes, they had killed 40 Crithian soldiers. The Reaper ran through the dark corridors of the Talon's edge with his rescue team flanking him. Their footsteps were nearly silent despite their heavy armor. Behind them, they could hear Crithian soldiers shouting, trying to organize a response, but in the darkness and chaos, the aliens were stumbling over each other. "Status," the Reaper said quietly into his helmet comm. "Package secure," responded the team leader, a woman named Sarah Chen. "Data upload complete. Exit route is hot with at least 50 hostiles between us and the hangar." "Then we don't use the hangar. What's the alternative?" The Reaper pulled up a schematic on his wrist display. He had memorized the ship's layout during his hours in the cell, cross-referencing it with the data he had been transmitting. "Escape pods. Deck 7, Section 4. It's closer and they won't expect it." Sarah nodded inside her helmet. "You heard him. New route. Marcus, take point." A massive soldier moved to the front, his armor marked with combat scars. Marcus had served with the Reaper on a dozen missions. He trusted the man with his life, even if the legend made him nervous. They moved fast through the corridors, their weapons sweeping every corner. Twice they encountered Crithian soldiers. Both times the fights were over in seconds. The Reaper moved with brutal efficiency, his shots precise and deadly. Years of combat had made him something more machine than man, but Sarah noticed something as they fought. The Reaper hesitated for a fraction of a second before each kill. His finger would hover on the trigger, and she could see him choosing his targets carefully. He killed only those who directly threatened them, passing by wounded Crithians without finishing them. They reached an intersection, and the Reaper held up his fist. Everyone froze. He pointed to his ear, then down the left corridor. They listened. Footsteps, heavy ones. "A lot of them ambush," Marcus whispered. "They're waiting around the corner." The Reaper studied his wrist display. The emergency lighting was coming back online in sections, which meant the Crithians were adapting to his virus. They had maybe 10 minutes before full power returned. "How many?" Sarah asked. "Thermal shows 20, maybe 30, another team member reported. "They've set up a firing line. We go down that corridor, we're dead." The Reaper looked at the walls, the ceiling, the floor. His mind worked through possibilities at incredible speed. This was what he had been trained for, what he had become. Not just a soldier, but a weapon that could think and adapt. "There," he pointed to a maintenance hatch on the ceiling. "Access tunnel. It runs parallel to the main corridor. We go above them." "That tunnel's barely wide enough for one person," Marcus protested. "Exactly. They won't expect it. Sarah, Marcus, you two come with me. The rest hold here. Make noise, make them think we're preparing for a frontal assault. Give us 3 minutes, then fall back to the secondary route." "You're splitting the team?" Sarah's voice carried doubt. The Reaper met her eyes. "Trust me, they did." That was the curse and blessing of his reputation. People trusted the Reaper even when his plan seemed insane. Marcus boosted the Reaper up to the hatch. He pried it open with his combat knife and pulled himself inside. The tunnel was cramped and dark, barely high enough to crawl through. He moved forward, his weapon held in front of him, Sarah and Marcus following behind. The tunnel's walls were hot, the metal burning against his hands even through his gloves. But he ignored the pain. Pain was temporary. Mission failure was permanent. Below them, through the thin metal floor of the tunnel, they could hear the Crithian soldiers talking. Their language was harsh and guttural, but the Reaper had learned enough to understand basic commands. "They're coming," a Crithian officer was saying. "Hold this position. We have them trapped." The Reaper smiled grimly. He counted positions based on the voices. 23 soldiers spread across a 30-meter corridor, all focused on the direction his team would come from. None watching their backs. He reached a section of the tunnel floor that had a maintenance panel. Slowly, carefully, he worked it loose. Light filtered up from below. He could see the Crithians now, their backs to him, weapons raised. "Ready?" he whispered into his comm. "Ready," Sarah and Marcus confirmed. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1, mark." The Reaper dropped the panel and fell through. He landed in a crouch behind the Crithian line and opened fire. The aliens spun in surprise, but it was too late. Sarah and Marcus dropped through right after him, their weapons adding to the chaos. The fight was brutal and short. The Crithians had been ready for a frontal assault, not an attack from behind. Within seconds, half of them were down. The survivors tried to regroup, but they were caught between the Reaper's group and the rest of his team advancing from the other direction. When the last Crithian fell, Sarah looked at the Reaper with new respect. "How did you know that tunnel would be there?" "I didn't, but I knew there had to be maintenance access in a corridor this long. Ships this size always have them." "You gambled our lives on a guess?" I gambled on experience and logic. There's a difference. They regrouped with the rest of the team and continued toward the escape pod bay. But now alarms were getting louder, and they could hear the ship's systems coming back online. The Crithians were overriding his virus faster than expected. Double time, the Reaper ordered. We're running out of clock. They sprinted through the corridors, abandoning stealth for speed. Crithian soldiers appeared at several intersections, but the team's suppressive fire kept them pinned down. They weren't trying to win fights anymore, just get through. Finally, they reached the escape pod bay. The room was large, with dozens of small pods lining the walls. Each one was designed to hold 4 Crithians, which meant it could fit 6 humans if they squeezed. Marcus immediately moved to the controls, working to activate a pod. Sarah and the others took defensive positions at the entrance, ready for pursuit. The Reaper moved to a computer terminal in the corner. His fingers flew across the alien interface, accessing systems and uploading commands. "What are you doing?" Sarah asked. "We need to leave now. One more thing," the Reaper said. "Can't waste this opportunity." He was accessing the ship's reactor control systems. Not to destroy it, that would kill too many people, but he could cripple it, by humanity time. "Pod's ready," Marcus called out. "Go," the Reaper ordered. "Everyone in." "I'll be right behind you." "Like hell," Sarah said. "We all leave together." "That's an order, Lieutenant. And I'm countermanding it, sir." "Whatever you're doing, do it faster." The Reaper wanted to argue, but he knew Sarah. She was almost as stubborn as he was. He focused on the terminal, uploading the final commands. The ship's weapon systems would shut down for hours. Their shields would be useless. The Talon's edge would be a floating target. "Done," he said, turning from the terminal. That's when Commander Zethrax appeared at the entrance with a dozen soldiers. "Going somewhere?" the Crithian commander hissed. His scales were dark with rage, and he held a heavy plasma rifle. "You've destroyed my ship, killed my soldiers, stole my data. Did you really think you'd escape?" The Reaper's team opened fire, but Zethrax had positioned his soldiers well. They were using the doorframe for cover, and their return fire forced the humans to take cover behind the escape pods. "We're pinned," Marcus reported. "If we try to board the pod, they'll cut us down." The Reaper assessed the situation. The standoff could last minutes, and every second gave more Crithians time to arrive. They needed to break this deadlock fast. He looked around the room, his tactical mind working. The escape pods, the computer terminal, the walls. Then he saw it. An environmental control panel, marked with Crithian warning symbols. It controlled the atmospheric pressure for this section. "Cover me," he said, then ran for the panel. Plasma bolts screamed past him, one burning across his shoulder. He ignored the pain and reached the panel, smashing it open with the butt of his rifle. Inside were manual override controls. "What are you doing?" Zethrax shouted. "You'll kill everyone in this room." "No," the Reaper said, his hand on the emergency release. "Just you." He yanked the lever. Immediately, warning sirens screamed. The main doors began to close automatically. Emergency protocol to contain a hull breach. Zethrax and his soldiers had seconds to choose. Get out or be trapped in a depressurizing room. The Crithian commander roared in fury but ordered his soldiers to retreat. As the doors slammed shut, the Reaper opened the secondary controls and stopped the depressurization. It had been a bluff, but Zethrax couldn't take the risk. "Everyone in the pod now," the Reaper ordered. His team scrambled aboard. The pod was cramped, barely enough room for all 6 of them. The Reaper hit the launch button as he pulled himself inside. The door sealed, and the pod shot out of the Talon's edge like a bullet. Through the small viewport, the Reaper watched the massive Crithian warship grow smaller. It was listing now, power flickering across its hull, crippled but not destroyed. Exactly as planned. "Mission status?" he asked. Sarah checked her data pad. All intelligence downloaded and transmitted to Fleet Command. Enemy encryption codes, ship positions, supply routes, everything. Casualties? None. Some injuries, nothing serious. The Reaper nodded. A perfect mission by his standards. They had accomplished every objective and everyone was coming home alive. "It didn't happen often, sir," Marcus said quietly. "That thing back there threatening to depressurize the room with us still in it." The human carrier Valiant hung in the darkness of space like a sleeping giant. Its massive hull was scarred from 100 battles, but it remained one of humanity's most powerful warships. The escape pod approached slowly, its automated systems requesting permission to dock. Inside the pod, the Reaper sat with his eyes closed, breathing slowly. His shoulder burned where the plasma bolt had grazed him, but he had learned long ago to compartmentalize pain. Sarah was watching him with concern. "You should let medical check that wound," she said. "Later." "Sir, you're bleeding." "Later," he repeated firmly. The pod docked with a gentle thud. The door hissed open and they stepped into the hangar bay. A dozen soldiers in full combat gear surrounded them immediately, weapons lowered but ready. "Standard protocol when retrieving personnel from enemy territory." "Stand down," Sarah ordered. "Mission successful. We're clean." A familiar voice cut through the tension. "I'll be the judge of that." Admiral James Corrigan walked through the crowd, his gray uniform crisp despite the late hour. He was a tall man in his 60s with hard eyes that had seen too many wars. He looked at the Reaper with an expression that mixed respect and something else. Maybe fear. "Debrief in 30 minutes, Corrigan said. "Medical first." "I'm fine, Admiral." That wasn't a request, Sierra 77. The Reaper knew better than to argue with Corrigan. The Admiral was one of the few people in the military who could command him. He nodded and followed a medic to the ship's medical bay. The examination was quick and thorough. The burn on his shoulder was treated, and the medic checked for other injuries. She found old scars covering most of his body, a map of violence written in flesh. Each one told a story of survival. "How do you sleep at night?" the medic asked quietly, looking at the scars. "I don't," the Reaper answered honestly. "Not much anyway. You should talk to someone. The psychological support team can help." He almost laughed. What could they do? Tell him to feel better about the 300 lives he had taken? Explain how to forget the faces that haunted him? There was no therapy for what he had become. "I'm fine," he said, sliding off the examination table and pulling on his shirt. 30 minutes later, he sat in the briefing room with Admiral Corrigan, Sarah, and several intelligence officers. The walls were covered with screens showing data from the Talon's Edge mission. Crathian fleet positions, encryption algorithms, supply routes. It was a treasure of information. "This is incredible," one of the intelligence officers said, scrolling through files. "We have their entire communication network. We can read every message, track every ship. This changes everything." "It cost 40 Crithian lives," the Reaper said quietly. The room fell silent. People looked uncomfortable. They didn't like to think about the killing, just the results. Corrigan leaned forward. Was there another way? The Reaper thought about the question. Maybe, but not one I could see in the moment. "I made the choices I had to make." "That's what I thought," Corrigan said. He stood and walked to the main screen, bringing up a star chart. Red markers showed Crithian-controlled systems. Blue showed human territory. The red outnumbered the blue by more than half. The Crithians have been winning this war. They have better technology, more ships, stronger weapons. The only advantage we've had is people like you. Operatives willing to do what others can't. Or won't, the Reaper added. "Fair point, but because of your mission, we now have a real chance to turn this war around. We know where their fleets are. We know their supply lines. We can hit them where it hurts." Corrigan pressed a button and new information appeared on the screen. Fleet orders, attack plans, target coordinates. The Reaper read them quickly, his tactical mind already analyzing the strategy. "You're planning a major offensive," he said. "More than that. We're going to push them back to their home systems. With your intelligence, we can coordinate strikes across a dozen sectors simultaneously. The Crithians won't know what hit them. They'll retaliate, escalate. Let them. We'll be ready." The Reaper stood and walked closer to the screen. He studied the attack plan, seeing the bigger picture. Thousands of ships, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, all moving because of the information he had stolen. "How many casualties?" he asked. "Excuse me?" "In this offensive. How many of our people will die?" Corrigan was quiet for a moment. Strategic estimates put it between 5 and 10,000. Maybe more if the Crithians fight harder than expected. 10,000 lives. The number hung in the air like smoke. The Reaper thought about all the people who would die because of orders given, because of plans made in clean rooms by officers who would never see the blood. "And how many enemy casualties?" he asked. "Significantly higher, maybe 50,000. 60,000 dead minimum. And that was just the beginning. If the Crithians escalated, if the war continued, how many more would die?" "There's another option," the Reaper said quietly. Everyone looked at him with surprise. Corrigan's eyes narrowed. "Explain." The Reaper pointed to the star chart. "We have their encryption codes. We have their communication networks. We can send messages that look like they're from Crithian Command. You want to use deception? I want to end this war without killing 60,000 people. How? The Reaper's mind was already working through the plan. The Crithians are a hierarchical species. Everything comes from the top. Their supreme commander, Vorath, he controls the entire military. If he gives an order, every Crithian soldier follows it. We can't reach Vorath. He's on their homeworld, surrounded by their most powerful fleets. We don't need to reach him physically, just his communications. We send false orders, make it look like they're coming from him. Orders to pull back, to negotiate, to stand down. One of the intelligence officers shook his head. They'd verify the orders. They'd confirm with Vorath directly, not if they can't reach him. We use the same virus I planted on the Talon's edge, but bigger. We hit their entire communication infrastructure at once, create chaos. In that chaos, we send the false orders. By the time they sort it out, their fleets will have already pulled back. Corrigan studied the Reaper carefully. That's a long shot. It might not work. But if it does, we save 60,000 lives, maybe more. And if it fails, then we do the offensive. We haven't lost anything by trying. The room was quiet. Officers looked at each other, considering the plan. It was risky, unconventional. But it was also exactly the kind of thinking that had made the Reaper legendary. Sarah spoke up. I think it's worth trying. The worst cases were back where we started. Corrigan paced the room, thinking. Finally, he nodded. All right. We'll try it your way first. But I need you to lead the operation. You understand their systems better than anyone. I'll need a team, and access to our best cyber warfare specialists. You'll have whatever you need. But there's one more thing. Corrigan pulled up another file on the screen. It showed a planet, green and blue, with orbital defenses. The Crithian homeworld. If your plan works, if their fleets pull back and their government is in chaos, that's when we make our move. What move? We send you in. One final mission. You get to Vorath directly and ensure he accepts our peace terms. The Reaper stared at the planet. The Crithian homeworld. The most heavily defended location in their empire. Getting in would be nearly impossible. Getting out would be completely impossible. That's a suicide mission, he said. Yes, it is. But if anyone can do it, it's you. And if it works, the war ends. Not with 60,000 dead, but with one. Mine. Corrigan met his eyes. I won't order you to take this mission. It has to be your choice. The Reaper looked around the room. Everyone was watching him, waiting. He thought about the 300 Crithians he had already killed. He thought about the humans who had died in this war. He thought about what he had become, the weapon he had let himself turn into. Maybe this was his chance for redemption. Maybe he could save more lives than he had taken. Or maybe he was just tired of being a monster. I'll do it, he said. But only if the peace terms are fair. This can't be about human victory. It has to be about ending the killing. Agreed, Corrigan said. We're not conquerors. We just want our people to be safe. Over the next 3 days, the Reaper worked with the cyber warfare team. They built a virus that would spread through the Crithian communication network like wildfire. They crafted messages that would look authentic, using Vorath's communication style and personal codes. They planned the timing down to the second. Sarah found him alone in his quarters the night before the operation. He was sitting in the dark staring at the wall. Can't sleep? She asked. Never could. She sat down next to him. You know this is crazy, right? Even if the virus works, even if you get to their homeworld, the chances of survival are almost zero. I know. Then why do it? He was quiet for a long time. Because I'm tired, Sarah. Tired of killing. Tired of being afraid to close my eyes because of what I'll see. If I can end this war, really end it, maybe I can finally rest. You're a good man, she said softly. I hope you know that. He shook his head. I'm a killer who's trying to become a good man. There's a difference. She took his hand. Promise me something. If you survive this, if you somehow make it back, promise you'll try to live a normal life. No more missions, no more wars, just peace. I don't know if I can. Promise anyway. He squeezed her hand. I promise. The small stealth ship cut through space like a shadow. It was one of humanity's newest designs, built for infiltration and coated with materials that made it nearly invisible to sensors. Inside the cramped cockpit, the Reaper flew alone toward the Crithian homeworld. He had refused a pilot, refused backup. This mission was his to complete or fail. No one else would die if things went wrong. The planet grew larger on his viewport. Kreth Prime, the Crithian homeworld. It was beautiful in its own way. Covered in purple vegetation and silver oceans, millions of Crithians lived on the surface. Most of them civilians who had never fired a weapon. They were just people trying to live their lives like humans anywhere. The Reaper had to remember that. They weren't all monsters, just like not all humans were heroes. His sensors showed the orbital defenses. Even with the chaos from his virus, the homeworld was still heavily protected. Defense platforms, patrol ships, automated weapons. Getting through would require perfect timing and a lot of luck. He waited and watched. The virus was still working, causing communication breakdowns across the Crithian military. Ships were moving in confused patterns, trying to confirm orders and get information. In that confusion, there were gaps in the defenses. The Reaper saw his chance. He powered down everything except life support and maneuvering thrusters, making the ship as quiet as possible. Then he dove toward the planet, slipping between two patrol ships that were arguing with each other over conflicting orders. Alarms screamed in his cockpit. One of the platforms had detected him. Weapons locked on. He had seconds before they fired. His hands moved across the controls with practiced speed. He fired countermeasures, small devices that mimicked his ship's signature. The weapons platform's targeting system hesitated, confused by multiple targets. In that moment of confusion, the Reaper pushed his engines to maximum and dove into the atmosphere. Fire engulfed his ship as it hit the air at incredible speed. The heat shields glowed red, then white. Warning lights filled the cockpit. But he held course, riding the fire down toward the surface. He leveled out at high altitude, scanning for his target. The capital city spread below him, a massive metropolis of towers and connecting bridges. At its center stood the command citadel, where Supreme Commander Vorath ruled the Crithian Empire. Landing would be impossible near the citadel. Too many guards, too many sensors. But the Reaper had studied the city during his planning. He knew there was a maintenance tunnel system that connected to the citadel's lower levels. He just had to reach it. He brought the ship down in an industrial district, landing in an abandoned factory. The stealth coating had burned away during entry, and the ship would be detected soon. He had maybe an hour before the Crithian military arrived. He grabbed his gear and stepped out into the alien world. The air was breathable but smelled strange, like copper and something sweet. The gravity was slightly heavier than Earth normal, but manageable. The city was in chaos. Crithians moved through the streets in confusion, staring at their communication devices that no longer worked properly. Some were panicking, others were angry. None of them paid attention to the human moving through the shadows. The Reaper had applied a camouflage agent to his skin and clothes, a technology that shifted colors to match the surroundings. It wasn't perfect, but in the chaos and crowds it was enough. He reached the maintenance tunnel entrance after 20 minutes of careful movement. It was guarded by two Crithian soldiers who looked nervous and confused. The Reaper waited and watched. They were checking their communications repeatedly, trying to get orders. He could kill them quietly. It would be easy. But he remembered his promise to Sarah, his promise to himself. No more unnecessary deaths. Instead, he used a small device to create a distraction. An explosion sound echoed from a nearby street. The guards immediately ran toward it, leaving their post unguarded. The Reaper slipped into the tunnel entrance and sealed the door behind him. The tunnels were dark and smelled of chemicals. Water dripped from pipes that ran along the ceiling. His helmet's display showed the route to the citadel. 2 kilometers of maze-like passages. He moved quickly but carefully, aware that any sound would echo. Twice he heard other people in the tunnels and had to hide until they passed. Maintenance workers, probably trying to fix the communication systems. Finally, he reached the access point to the citadel. It was sealed with a heavy security door. The Reaper pulled out his hacking tools and went to work. This was the critical moment. If he triggered an alarm, he would be dead within minutes. His hands were steady as he bypassed the security systems. Years of training had made him expert at this. The door clicked and slid open. No alarms. He was inside. The citadel's lower levels were surprisingly empty. Most of the staff had probably been sent to deal with the communication crisis. The Reaper moved through corridors decorated with Crithian art and symbols of military glory. Every corner could hide an enemy. Every door could be his last. He took the service elevator to the command level. His heart was pounding, but his breathing remained calm. He had learned to control his body's fear response long ago. The elevator doors opened onto a grand hallway. At the far end stood massive doors guarded by 4 elite soldiers. Their armor was black and gold, marking them as the Supreme Commander's personal guard. The Reaper stepped out of the elevator. The guards saw him immediately and raised their weapons. "I am here to see Supreme Commander Vorath," the Reaper said in the Crethian language. His accent was rough but understandable. "Human," one guard shouted. "How did you get in here?" "The same way I got onto the Talon's edge. The same way I've gotten into every Crethian facility I've targeted. Your security is good, but not good enough." The guards moved to surround him. The Reaper kept his hands visible, showing he was not reaching for a weapon. "Kill him," one guard said. "Wait," another replied. "If he wanted to attack, he would have done it already. I think he really wants to talk." The guard captain activated his communication device, but it was still not working properly. He cursed in frustration, then made a decision. "Search him. Remove all weapons. Then we take him to the Supreme Commander. If this is a trick, we will kill him slowly." They found his weapons quickly. Guns, knives, even the small explosives hidden in his belt. They were thorough and professional. When they were done, the Reaper stood completely unarmed. The captain pushed open the massive doors. Beyond was a command center that looked more like a throne room. Screens covered the walls, showing star charts and tactical data. In the center, on a raised platform, sat Supreme Commander Vorath. He was huge, even by Crethian standards. His scales were dark red, marked with scars from countless battles. His 4 eyes were the color of old blood. He radiated power and intelligence, so, Vorath said, his voice deep and resonant. "The Reaper comes to me willingly. I must admit, I did not expect this." The guards pushed the Reaper forward. He walked calmly, showing no fear. "I came to discuss peace," the Reaper said. Vorath laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. "Peace after you crippled my fleet? After your virus destroyed my communication network? After you humiliated the Crethian military? You expect me to make peace? I expect you to be intelligent. You're losing this war. My people have your encryption codes, your fleet positions, everything. We can predict every move you make. If the fighting continues, you will lose. Then we will fight until the last Crethian falls. We do not surrender." The Reaper shook his head. "That's pride talking, not strategy. I read your military history during my time on the Talon's edge. You're a brilliant commander. You know when to fight and when to negotiate. This is a time to negotiate." Vorath stood and walked down from his platform. He was twice the Reaper's size, towering over him. "You are one human alone in my command center. I could have you executed right now. You could. But then you'll never know the full extent of what we've learned. You'll never understand how we beat you. And you'll make the same mistakes again." The Supreme Commander circled the Reaper slowly, studying him. "You are not what I expected. They call you the Reaper, a monster who kills without mercy. But you stand here unarmed, talking about peace. Why?" The Reaper met his eyes steadily. "Because I'm tired of killing. Because this war has cost both our species too much. Because I've seen enough death to know that victory means nothing if everyone is dead. Humans killed thousands of my soldiers, and Crethians killed hundreds of thousands of humans. Colonies destroyed. Families torn apart. Children orphaned. We can trade atrocities all day, or we can end this." Vorath was quiet for a long moment. "What are your terms?" "Mutual withdrawal. Recognized borders. Trade agreements that benefit both species. Cultural exchange to prevent future misunderstandings. And most important, a joint council to resolve disputes without war. You would trust us after everything?" "I would try. Because the alternative is extinction for one or both of our species. Humans are adaptable. We'll keep evolving our tactics. We'll keep becoming more dangerous. Eventually, we'll develop weapons that make the virus look like a toy. Is that really what you want? An arms race that ends with both our worlds burning?" Vorath turned away, looking at the screens showing his scattered fleets. The Reaper could see him thinking, calculating odds, considering options.